Joining us now is David Harris Jr., the host of the David Harris Jr. Show, author and conservative commentator. So David, I saw some of your videos since last night, but I know a lot of our viewers may not necessarily see them yet, so I'll tell them to, first of all, go follow you on social media, but also I want to get your response to what you saw last night in the debate.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on today. What I saw was a patriotic businessman that left his limelight lifestyle, just a very cushy lifestyle, to go and serve this country that's been bashed and completely destroyed in the media for 4 years. A man that had to stand up against an attempted coup against him. A lot of that proof is coming out right now. And then was actually debating two people. He was debating Chris Wallace, and he was debating Joe Biden. So I saw in Joe Biden what used to be a very polished debater, speaker, politician. He's been debating for decades in the Senate, and he looks like he's lost a lot of his gumption. I mean, he kept getting twisted up several times. He tried to keep his calm composure to his behavior, but it still showed through that he's got some cognitive decline. So overall, I was very happy with what the president said, the issues that he called Joe Biden out on. His allegiance, I would call it, to China, why Hunter Biden got the money that he got. Most recently exposed was from the mayor of Moscow's wife, $3.5 million. And Joe Biden didn't want to take any accountability for any of that stuff. So I see a very patriotic, American-loving president that is trying to do the best he can to serve our country. And on the other side, I saw a politician, a lifelong politician that's been in office 47 years, that now says all of a sudden he's going to change things in government if he becomes president. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
And a couple of keywords stuck out to me right there. You were talking about the idea of a patriotic president, someone who loves their country, for example. And one issue that did come up last night was President Trump's decision to do away with what's called critical race theory. Now, Chris Wallace took issue with even what that was called. I think he called it racial sensitivity training, which is a little bit different, actually. In fact, there are very different ways about going about one from an education perspective and one just being tolerant. But when it comes to that issue as well, what did you think about that conversation? Do you think President Trump is right to address what's being taught in our nation's schools, or do you think it was misplaced for a presidential debate?
No, I think it's absolutely something that especially the president of the United States should call out for what it is. And I think that Chris Wallace did all of Americans a disservice by referring to it as racial, sensitivity training. There's no racial sensitivity or insensitivity about it. It's absolutely communist in nature. It breeds hate. It basically says that America was founded by a bunch of old white slave owners, and everything that this country has to do with slavery. It teaches people to hate our country, to hate our history. It disregards the absolute majesty of the Declaration of Independence and what our early founding fathers went through to even create this experiment that we have that's created the greatest country in the history of the world. He absolutely had the right to call it out, and Chris Wallace did all Americans a disservice by trying to loft it up as some kind of racial sensitivity issue. It's nothing like it.
And I've heard a lot of conservatives say this, too, that, of course, America isn't a perfect country. It never has been, but it strives to be better. And that's something that doesn't get necessarily taught in our nation's classrooms, whether we're talking about critical race theory, we're talking about the 1619 Project, for example, which looks at America through a prism of racism, says that it starts with racism, and then you can go from there, whereas a lot of people are saying, I mean, this country is one of the greatest in civilization, in all of American, not only American history, I should say, humankind history. So do you think that, for example, when we look at what is happening on the streets right now, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Antifa, no matter who you want to talk about, that perhaps that is fed by the narrative that America is first inherently wrong and then everything comes after that? Do you think that's the prism that they're looking through?
Yeah, I absolutely do. BLM is a Marxist group. The co-founders have said they're Marxist, they're anti-American, they're anti the traditional family. They're anti-black men, as far as I'm concerned, and they're anti-black people, especially if they don't agree with them. So for groups like BLM and Antifa to be out literally creating chaos, wreaking havoc, destroying businesses, black-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses, and all doing it in the name of Black Lives Mattering, it's complete hypocrisy. Antifa is the same. They should be designated a terrorist group. I think the president actually is going to do that. I think he said he's going to sign an EO to suggest to declare that KKK and Antifa is a domestic terrorist group, and they should be. The narrative that the mainstream media continues to purport to all of us Americans, though, is, oh, they're peaceful protesters. They ignore the rioting, the chaos, and the murders that have taken place. More black people have been murdered and killed since these riots started from George Floyd than then the actual deaths themselves, then how many unarmed black people were killed last year. So it's complete hypocrisy, and the American people have to be able to see through that to understand what's really taking place.
And David, I'm glad you brought up that designation of the KKK and Antifa as domestic terrorist organizations. President Trump made that announcement about 5 days ago, but that wasn't brought up at the debate. Instead, it was asking him to condemn once again white supremacy, things of that nature. And a lot of people are saying that's something that he's done before. In fact, the Trump campaign listed all the times where he has done that, but the president's response maybe wasn't exactly perfect for that matter, but that is the soundbite coming out of it tonight. So I think that is one thing that maybe he has to combat moving forward. We've already seen him address those issues coming out of today as well. But I think that was a clear indication, too, of what you were saying before, where Chris Wallace just didn't seem to have the substance of all these topics, especially when it came to the conservative perspective. A lot of it seemed like perhaps he was only getting one side of these issues. So I think you're right to point that out when it comes to Chris Wallace. But David Harris Jr., I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, breaking down your perspective of Tuesday's debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you can follow me at David J. Harris Jr. and make sure you get to my store, davidharrisjr.store, and get yourself one of these right here. You never know when you're going to need to show your support. They just fit right in your pocket for our president. davidharrisjr.store.
That is a nifty contraption right there. Very well done, David.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.